that for a slice of fried gold?
You think this is a fucking costume? This is a way of life.
I'll be back.
Just a flesh wound. I'm not gonna hurt you. I'm just gonna bash your brains.
Take your stinking paws off me, you damn dirty ape!
I'm sorry, Ben. I'm afraid I can't do that.
It's alive! It's alive! It's alive!
I guess everyone's entitled to one good scare.
We're better.
Yeah.
Introduce Bethany to Best in Show and then
yes.
Consideration.
Oh yeah.
And we were both watching it, and we were like, "Oh my God, freaking Jennifer Coolidge has some real bunny vibes."
Yeah.
Oh my God, freaking Jennifer Coolidge has some real bunny vibes.
Yeah. Yeah.
And we meant that both in the most beautifully loving way possible.
She would consider
Just
that.
like,
She would consider that a great compliment.
yes.
But yeah, we did the same thing after we watched Schitt's Creek. We've seen Best in Show 100 times, but after
I have, yeah.
Seeing, we got on that Eugene Levy and Catherine O'Hara kick, and we watched it, and we watched that and A Mighty Wind.
Yeah, I
a
need
little
to
double
show
feature.
her-
I've
need
only
to show
seen
her
For Your
Mighty Wind.
Consideration once.
Me too.
I'd like to revisit it.
Just seeing Catherine O'Hara do her facelift with her own facial muscles
Yeah,
is the
She's
best
amazing.
part of For Your Consideration.
she's amazing. Schitt's Creek's amazing too.
It's beautiful.
And have you watched the documentary?
Yes, we cried.
Yeah.
We
Well,
cried.
that's the entire time.
Yeah.
Especially when they read that letter, though.
Oh, dude, Jesus Christ.
Oh, speaking of Catherine O'Hara,
Time.
Yeah.
Especially when they read that letter, though.
Oh, dude, Jesus Christ.
speaking of Catherine O'Hara and Eugene Levy, this week on the show, we're going to be having a conversation about a movie they both would have starred had it appeared a little bit later in Hollywood.
And America.
Well, hello, and welcome to Cinema Shock. It's the podcast that gives you the behind the scenes and all the details you want to know about all of your favorite cult and genre cinema. I am one of your hosts, Gary Horn.
Hey, I'm Justin Bishop. We are joined today, first of all, by a returning and still alive Todd A. Davis.
Welcome back from COVID.
Yay. Thanks for having me back, guys. I'm super happy to be here and not dead.
Yes. Thank you, Todd. We're glad you're feeling better. You're still a little hoarse, but you're feeling better.
I'm getting there.
Yeah, good. I'm glad you're feeling better. I'm glad your wife is on the up and up.
Yes.
So we missed you last week. We'll maybe get you.
Yeah, because I definitely have
'cause-
some. Definitely want to chime in on that.
And we're joined also today, that other voice you heard, the deep, soothing baritone of Mr. DJ Wilson. There it
Hey,
is.
thanks for having me back.
Thanks for coming
That's
back.
the voice we decided on that's come up. I had chosen Miles as our Quentin Tarantino stand-in voice, but my other choice was DJ.
That's Quentin
It should
Tarantino.
be Miles, who I think sounds like Tarantino, or DJ, who is the opposite of Quentin Tarantino.
Oh man! So we're continuing. This is the third episode of our 6 Degrees of Kill Bill series, and these are films that we are discussing. That if you haven't joined us on the previous ones, first of all, go back and listen to them because they're really fun. We had a lot of fun with those episodes. But these are all films that have directly inspired or influenced Quentin Tarantino's Kill Bill. There's dozens of movies that you can name, but these are the 6 that we think are probably the most obviously referenced in the film. And if there's one through line in many of the films that we're discussing in this series, including last week and the week before, it's revenge. There's a lot of revenge movies. It makes sense. Kill Bill is a revenge movie, so it makes sense that several of the movies that inspired it are also revenge movies. Who began this series with Death Rides a Horse. It's a story of a man on a lifelong quest for revenge against the gang that murdered his family. Then we did Lady Snowblood, which is the story of a woman whose entire existence was to act as a tool for revenge against the people who had wronged her family. And then today we discuss a film, another one that kind of falls into that revenge film category, and one that Quentin Tarantino himself has called the roughest revenge film ever made. It's the 1973 Swedish exploitation classic thriller, A Cruel Picture, aka They Call Her One Eye.
When cruelty knows no bounds,
when evil then ran for their lives.
We've got a peck of trouble. Frigga killed one of her regular clients yesterday. And I'm betting she's out to get the three of us.
They defiled her beauty. They robbed her of speech. They brutalized her body. And when they had finished, she used what was left to repay every blow with her own terrible kind of revenge. Your most fearful nightmares, the most cruel sights you have ever seen, cannot match the shock of this motion picture experience.
Was that air quotes around classic, Justin?
I mean, it depends on your.
If by classic you mean older.
I gotta say, I initially thought this movie was Italian, but with all the plot holes, it's definitely Swiss.
Oh wow!
It's so good to be back on the show, you guys. Thank you. I've missed you.
I loved it. I loved it. I was a fan of that one.
Putting the comedian.
This movie was Italian, but with all the plot holes, it's definitely Swiss.
Oh wow!
It's so good to be back on the show, you guys. Thank you. I've missed you.
I loved it. I loved it. I was a fan of that one.
Putting the comedian in writer comedian Todd A. Davis.
Available for parties, bar mitzvahs, corporate events.
I hesitated when I said classic only because your mileage may vary, and I'll get into that, and I understand if your mileage does vary. I happen to like this movie, as I know DJ does, which is why we asked him on the show. DJ, don't you have a Frigga tattoo?
I absolutely do.
Really? Seriously?
Yeah. So right on his arm.
God.
There she is.
Oh, wait. Hold on. I've got it in speaker mode. Hold on. Oh, yeah. Holy shit. Yeah. Wow.
So
That's cool.
You're the only person I know with a Frigga tattoo or
the
Madeline
only person
tattoo.
I know.
So it only felt natural to bring you on the show anyway. But before we get into the details of conflict, famously, the overall kind of pleasantness of the country, it's a very pleasant country. How did they get to the point where films as despicable, and whether you like thriller or not, you can't deny that it is a despicable film. How did they get to the point where movies like that were being produced regularly? This is one of many films of its kind being produced in Sweden at the time. So to answer that question, we'll need to trace the Swedish film industry all the way back to its inception. So as the film medium began gaining popularity in the early 1900s, the Swedish government, they were kind of frightened by this new emerging art form, and they panicked. They panicked, and they created the National Board of Film Classification, which was the first state-sponsored film censorship bureau of its kind in the entire world.
So they were around before the MPAA?
MPAA didn't come around until 1967. They were around before the Hays Code, which came around in 19...
So they were around before the MPAA?
MPAA didn't come around until 1967. They were around before the Hays Code, which came around in 1934.
Oh, cool.
So because pre-1934, American films were not subject to censorship. So yeah, this was way before that, decades before.
Wow.
For decades, the main types of film being produced in Sweden were of a genre called Pilsner filmer, which means beer films. They're beer movies. Is literally what that means.
Nice. I love that.
Pilsner filmer. And I will say there will be several other Swedish names and words that I will attempt to pronounce in this, just like I did on Lady Snowblood last week. I will very likely fuck them up. But I will try, and I will try not to do it in a Swedish chef accent every time. But I can't.
I was saving
just
it
once. Just give it to it once, Justin. I'll drop it completely if you do it. If you give it an honest 100%, just one.
I'm gonna let it work its way organically into the conversation. Yeah, but I
was gonna say, like,
what a
that's
world.
kind of what we're doing here.
Well, these Pilsner films, these were what was being produced in Sweden during, while the rest of the world was busy fighting World War I and World War II, and they were making movies about fat, jolly dudes singing songs about brotherhood and friendship. That
ticks all the boxes of this show, guys. That's why we're in the top 20 in Sweden.
That's a good point, Todd. We are very popular in Sweden.
Yeah. We are. It's just because we're also big jolly dudes who drink beers.
Who drink beer, and we don't sing a lot of songs, but
essentially what separates us from every other podcast is we're all white bearded guys.
The Swedish.
It's very unique in the podcast world.
Very diverse. Very diverse.
By the 1950s, Sweden had begun creating a type of film that a writer by the name of Daniel Ekeroth, who we owe a lot of this information to, by the way, calls sensations films. Films that reveled in themes of sex and violence. Ekeroth actually wrote a book called Swedish Sensationsfilms, which is where a lot of this information about the history of Swedish cinema comes from. It's a great book. It's if you're interested in the history of exploitation movies, I recommend checking that one out. And the film that kicked all of this off in Sweden was Arne Mattison's film One Summer of Happiness. So it's pretty tame by today's standards. This was 1951 or so, but the film ignited a worldwide controversy by showing something that until then had basically been forbidden in cinema, and that was a bare boob, a single bare boob.
Let's be honest, fellas, that's how it always starts for all of us.
Was it black bear or grizzly?
Oh my God. So after this controversial nip slip, Sweden had a reputation for being sexually liberated. There was a lot of sexual liberation going on in the country at the time, and it was being reflected in their filmmaking. This was something that would continue in the 60s and 70s. But this initial film kind of like, this is the reputation that Sweden got. Like, they're the ones who were making boob movies, And this was further, this is a fire that was further fanned by the release of Igmar Bergman's Summer with Monica in 1953. So these were the first in a pretty steady flow of films of this kind. And although Swedish censors initially tried to fight them, they gradually accepted the prevalence of on-screen sexuality in Swedish films. So as this movement rolled into the 1960s, Swedish films began being known internationally as essentially exploitation films. People were, like in many exploitation films, they were being sold on the sexual content of the film. Even Igmar Bergman, who is, I guess I would say, known as an art house director primarily, he even participated in this with the 1960, was when that came out. It's a film that is, yes, regarded as a masterpiece of foreign cinema, but also happens to be a rape revenge film, and it was essentially remade. I mean, it was remade in all but, I think, legal rights by Wes Craven in 1972 as The Last House on the Left. The Virgin Spring also is of note because it depicted the first ever on-screen vomiting. First time anyone had ever puked on screen.
Really?
Yep.
Wow.
There you go.
The things you find when you start researching this stuff.
Masters of cinema, man.
Yeah. So with the international success of The Virgin Spring, which if you have not seen, I do recommend, especially if you're familiar with Last House on the Left, go check out The Virgin Spring. It's wild to watch in retrospect. That movie won Best Foreign Language Film awards at both the Oscars and the Golden Globes. So after the success, both critically and commercially, Swedish directors began leaning into what they thought sold the film and made it popular, which was the sleazier aspects of it. So probably the most famous film to be released in the wake of this new kind of Swedish film movement was Vilgot Stolmans. Am I saying that right? You might know, DJ. I don't know. I know you know this movie. It's I Am Curious Yellow from 1967.
Yes, that's right. I Am Curious. Was it yellow and blue?
Yeah. Yellow was first and then blue came afterwards. And its sexual content is pretty explicit, but the film stopped just short of showing actual unsimulated intercourse on screen. But within a few months, there was a movie by a director named Stefan Jarl called They Call Us Misfits that actually went there. It was a documentary about these like hipster types, and it depicted actual sex between the two subjects, between the two people. Like, it basically was a documentary that had a sex scene in it. Dignity. The Swedish Board of Film Classification immediately banned the film, but then the country's Minister of Culture intervened and ordered the film to be released uncut. So now these filmmakers have the government
wank to it.
But when this happened, the
guy
minister
was uncut.
I don't know. I haven't seen it.
Oh,
I was just wondering. It was a different time.
Todd's full of zingers. These zingers have been working. Todd watched this movie like 2 weeks ago, so he's been working on these. But so, the Minister of Culture comes in and says this film must be released as it was created. So now these filmmakers have the government on their side. Basically, they feel like they are empowered to make the sleaziest movies they can think of. So later in 1968, a director named Mac Ahlberg released a movie called I, a Woman Part 2, which is an all-out exploitation follow-up to his own 1965 film, I, a Woman. The first one was pretty straightforward. It was which is an all-out exploitation follow-up to his own 1965 film, I, a Woman. The first one was pretty straightforward. It was kind of a drama. The second one, he really leaned into the exploitation aspects of it, and it wallows in sex and Nazi memorabilia and psychedelic music. Like, he was really trying to go for what he thought would make money, and it was very successful. By the way, if you think Mac Ahlberg's name sounds familiar, if you're a longtime listener of this show or a previous show, that's because Mac Ahlberg would later move to the United States, where he worked on a number of films as a cinematographer. He was actually a very successful cinematographer, starting out with Charles Band. And he worked as the DP on several Stuart Gordon films, including Reanimator and From Beyond. Dude's a hell of a cinematographer.
You might want to say director of photography, because we're with all the sex talk, DP's just going to have different connotation there, Justin.
Oh, Todd. I love you, Todd.
It's so good to be back on the show.
Golden age of exploitation films. And with these films in Sweden, a new kind of starlet emerged. This is one that combined purity, youthful enthusiasm, and a lack of inhibition. And one of the most famous of these actresses was an actress by the name of Christina Lindberg. Christina Lindberg was born in December of 1950 and began her modeling career at a young age. She got discovered on a beach, is the way the story goes. She was out on the beach in a bikini and got discovered by someone, and had her first photo session at the age of 16. And in Sweden at the time, they had these papers, kind of like Page Six, like in The Sun, the UK Sun, where they have like bikini girls. Like, she got her start doing that when she was in about 16 years old. So she was one of these girls. Of course, she got older and she became legal, and she was still in high school, but about 18 years old when she did her first nude photo shoot for a men's magazine called Lecter. 18 years old when she did her first nude photo shoot for a men's magazine called Lecter, which was an incredibly popular, very, very popular publication in Sweden. And because that magazine was so widely circulated, fame just kind of came naturally for Lindberg. She appeared in this magazine. She appeared in another very popular one called Fib Actuelt, I think is how you pronounce it. Yeah. I don't know. That's how it looks.
Yeah, it looks like that looks right.
Which was another very, very, these are like the two top like men's magazines in Sweden at the time. So she's appeared in both of these. And soon enough, she began being contacted by film producers.
You can find a lot of her work right now in a publication I like to call My Google Drive.
Lecter. Barely know her.
Oh, Todd, you've started something.
Floodgates are open, gentlemen.
Oh, well, another strange turn of phrase to use right now.
Got notes, guys.
Lindbergh's first film was actually an American production, but it was filmed entirely in Sweden and with a Swedish cast. It was called Made in Sweden, M-A-I-D, Made in Sweden, released in 1971, and then followed by a movie that the Swedish title that it was released under is called Rotmanad. But it was also released as in the much better English title of What Are You Doing After the Orgy? That one was actually released in 1970. It was released earlier, although Made in Sweden was filmed first.
Would you like to get a coffee or
Such
something?
a great title.
As soon as this guy finishes behind me,
he's got a leg up here and another leg. Hey, what are you doing later?
This guy behind me is going longer than expected, but afterwards, if you want to get a drink or something, I'd be into that.
So both of these films featured Lindberg doing what she would become known for, which is being frequently nude on
She's a cutie. Why not?
Yeah. I mean, hey, she's got the appropriate talents, let's say. So later in 1971, she appeared in a movie called Exposed, also released as Diary of a Rape. And that film,
that was the basis for Pixar's Inside Out, wasn't it? I didn't see.
I'm not even 100% sure I get it, but I still like that one.
That film was actually screened at the 1971 Cannes Film Festival, and was immediately banned in 27 countries. And that was a fact that was widely used in the film's promotional materials. First film ever banned in Sweden, I think is what they said.
Oh, wow.
So, and the hype surrounding this film, both positive and negative, because, the producers called in a lot of photographers and press when it premiered at Cannes. So there was a lot of pictures of Lindberg. They were hitting publications all over the world, and she became an international star. She even recorded a music single during this time. A country music single. I couldn't find it. I tried to find it. Single. I couldn't find it. I tried to find it.
Oh, come on.
I want to hear this so bad.
Oh, man. I know what I'm doing for the rest of the day.
But she actually also began to work in Japan at this time, became very popular there, made several movies before returning to Sweden to star in a movie called Anita, also released as Anita, Swedish Nymphette, which co-starred Stellan Skarsgård, who we all know from, he's in the Thor movies, he's the father of
he birthed the Skarsgårds.
Yes, the Pennywise and the vampire guy.
He's got quite the lineage.
So this was an early movie of his that he does not talk about very much, but he was the co-star of this movie alongside Lindberg. But then it was in 1972 that Lindberg began to work on the film that she is best known for, which is, of course, the movie we're talking about today, Thriller, A Cruel Picture.
And Thriller, cruel it is. So
it was actually called, I don't know, it flows.
I watched this on my birthday. It almost ruined my birthday. I'm not gonna be honest, guys.
Thriller was the second film of director Bo A. Vibenius, a man that Lindberg calls, this is a quote from her, an emotionally detached person. So Vibenius was, oddly enough, a former colleague of Igmar Bergman. He was the second unit director on Hour of the Wolf, which is Bergman's like weird kind of werewolf movie. And he was also the assistant director on Persona, which is probably my favorite Bergman movie that I've seen.
Who's to say like what happened to this guy in childhood? He could have experienced a lot of similar things to Madeline / Frigga. I did find that he was a former tank squadron leader. Yeah. So there's that part of it.
In the Swedish army? What do they do?
I guess nothing. But maybe he saw some shit. I don't know. Maybe that was part of it.
Are you sure it's tank and not taint?
It's a tank squadron. Yeah. He saw some shit. I don't know. Maybe that was part of it.
Are you sure it's tank and not taint?
It's a tank squadron.
Squadron. I think that's the other title of this movie,
which will play out in this movie. Actually, it comes in handy. But he says he was captivated by film early on, and I think that he was accepted. He calls being accepted in the Swedish film school one of his greatest moments. He says he couldn't have been happier with life, which again, for him, I'm not 100% sure what that looks like. But the main deal for Vibenius is that he had that old Gary Vaynerchuk motto of hustle. That was like his big deal. He knew immediately, like he says, when he was in, that anything that happens now, it's on me. My main goals are to take literally every opportunity that's presented and network, which is what led to his work with Bergman, who seemed, I don't know, he seemed to like him, I guess. And then he felt confident enough after those two movies. Every opportunity that's presented and network, which is what led to his work with Bergman, who seemed, I don't know, he seemed to like him, I guess. And then he felt confident enough after those two movies to strike out on his own.
Yeah, and he made his directorial debut in 1969 with a movie called How Marie Met Frederick. It's a children's film. This guy started his directorial career making a children's film. And the plot, this is the plot from IMDb. Although if you read that Swedish Sensationsfilms, there is a full review of this film, and it sounds bizarre. But the IMDb plot is Marie accidentally breaks a vase. Because of this, she runs away from home. On the run, she meets a boy named Frederick, a donkey, and a kangaroo.
And fucks them all.
There's also it's a children's film.
Oh, okay.
Well, actually, you say that.
No donkey, no kangaroo.
Oh.
But it's
be honest.
It's called.
You want to watch that?
Her Marie,
no donkey, no kangaroo.
Oh.
But it's
be honest.
It's called.
You want to watch that?
Her Marie Truffade Fredrik, or this would be a perfect Swedish chef voice word title, I think. But the only additional plot details to what Justin found there that I could find,
there's a lot of go-karting.
Yeah, is that it's children drive around in a fantasy world. in a speeding go-kart, chased by police, getting into gunfights that involve shooting other children's clothes off. It's very unique sounding. And I guess the world just wasn't ready for the artistic vision of Bo back in the 60s. Nowadays, that might be a bit.
Way ahead of his time.
But anyway, this sunk him financially because it was produced by his old production company.
It was a financial failure, and he lost a lot of money off of it. So he was determined that on his next film he would make something profitable, and so he leaned into the highly profitable world at the time of exploitation, the most commercial film ever made.
Like fucking Pixar would have picked this one up if they'd been around. Like they would have just been all over this. But that's legit his whole goal. He said he wanted to create his own fate, I should say, because that made me think of a wise woman once said, "There's no fate but what you make."
Oh yeah, she heard that from her time traveling boyfriend, I think.
There was another, there was another woman who said,
that's terrible.
That's in this movie. It's in this movie.
That is a movie. But I would like to take this moment, if we could, to add "There's no fate but what you make" to the ever-growing list of catchphrases that would be better closings to this show than "Johnny has the keys."
Are we keeping a list? Is there a list?
Yeah, well, not yet, but there might as well.
Okay.
How about any movie we talk about is going to have a better catchphrase than that? But anyway, so here we are. Just for the info, Bo is an agency at this point. He's the head of film, and he got himself a loan against him working like 3 months of overtime straight. He sat down and, to quote him from his own story, "Thriller, A Cruel Picture was written in 3 days and nights. Those were the days before computers, on an old typing machine. My fingers were actually bleeding after those 3 days of not only mental but physical finger work." Mental finger work is what I use on the ladies.
I'm so glad you put that out. I was like, please, somebody pick up that joke.
That was me, not him. Yeah. That was me. So here we are. Anyway, the most commercial film ever made.
All right. So they hire Lindberg for it, and to prepare for the lead role, Vibenius had Lindberg take both karate and weapons classes, much like we see her character do in the film. By the end of filming, Lindberg says she looked like one big bruise.
That's why you need a safe word.
So Vibenius had her go through this training because he wanted an air of authenticity to the film, and Lindberg agreed. In an interview, she said, quote, "I was of the opinion that if I was supposed to be beaten, then beat me, but do it in one take. Vibenius's rough approach was probably for the best. If you do it like that, you can tell it's for real." So she was like really getting hit. I mean, when she beats the shit out of that cop or the army guy in the film, I guess she is like really hitting him. And despite having appeared in several films by this point in her career, Lindberg was still a relatively inexperienced actress. Like she had not done a lot of let's just say she wasn't getting hired for her acting skills in her films before this, which may have led her to the decision by Vibenius to render her character completely mute in the film.
Yeah,
a decision that
completely mute. You hear that, Rose McGowan? Sometimes you just
they were gonna have her. They were gonna have her speak, and then she was gonna lose it after the first sex scene. But when the dude walked in, and it turned, she's got the crew is like looking around. They're like, we're not gonna move any movies that way.
We're not doing that. I actually think Lindberg is very good in this movie. For someone who is not necessarily known for her acting skills, I mean, she was appearing in essentially softcore porn before this. But so I'm not sure how well she would have, quote unquote, acted had she had line readings. But I think using her face, like in the movie, I think she's actually really good.
I think she's a lot of dramatic looking.
Yeah, I mean, I think she does a great job with it. Personally, I think she is very effective in the role.
Yeah, I'm joking around, but she's literally like the best part of this movie. I think she saves the movie, honestly.
Yes.
So at one point while shooting the film, she was actually taken into custody by the police because they were shooting this movie without any they were doing it like guerrilla style. They didn't have like streets blocked off. They didn't have any permits.
Wow.
So and there's a scene where she slams on the brake to her car. She jumps out and she's got a gun. And she didn't have any permits.
Wow.
So, and there's a scene where she slams on the brake to her car. She jumps out and she's got a gun and she jumps out and starts shooting. There were people out on the street when they were shooting this scene. So they just see a car come to a stop. They see a woman dressed all in black with a trench coat and an eye patch, holding a shotgun, tumble out of the car, and they start calling the cops, and she got arrested for it.
The way shooting at him.
Yeah, and the way that the scene was shot, the cameras were kind of low to the ground because they were trying to do this in secret, so the people could not see the cameras. So they thought that there was just a crazy woman jumping out of a car with a gun.
Yeah, that tracks.
But I love that they're out there doing it, man. Like they're doing all this stuff on their own. There's like an 11-person crew working on this. So I appreciate, I hate to say the word again, but like the hustle of it all. Like they're out there editing, scoring, mixing, all of the stuff. Like just like, I think the same quick and efficient. That was like their whole goal. Bo used his military connections from the tank squadron days. He secured a bunch of the cameras for the slow motion sequences, which is probably why there's so many of those. But
you gotta get use out of those cameras.
Right. What was funky is that they're specialized cameras used by the military for filming rocket launches. And so they shot at 500 frames per second instead of 24. Wow. And then when they took the film to the lab had no idea how to process them and destroyed 2 days worth of material, like right off the bat.
This movie was going to be way longer.
No, they they reshot all of the stuff. They had to do complete reshoots of like 2 days worth of stuff.
Because they got their money back.
I hope so too.
So one of the biggest bits of controversy in the film involved the infamous eye gouging scene. Gary, I thought about you during this scene, buddy.
Yeah.
Because I know Gary does not do eye violence very well. Gouging scene. Gary, I thought about you during this scene, buddy.
Yeah.
Because I know Gary does not do eye violence very well. So the rumor, which has never been confirmed, but is pretty widely considered true, is that they use an actual corpse in this scene. And I don't, honestly, looking at it, watching the scene, I don't know how else they would have done it because they did not have the money to do any sort of prosthetics that were that good.
When it came up, I thought the exact same thing. I was like, man, that can't have been cheap to make something that looks that good. Like I was like, I get there at a close up of it. Maybe it's just like one little prosthetic eye section. I was like, that's pretty impressive.
Turns out it's an actual dead girl. So, and Lindberg says that, she's in this interview I read with her, she says that only Vibenius can verify how it was done. Like you got to ask him, but here's what I've heard. So she says that Vibenius knew a doctor at Karolinska University Hospital, supposedly put some makeup around the eye because they're doing a close up. They put makeup on her around the eye. And then quite literally, they're doing all this at the hospital. They didn't like drag a body onto a set. They took cameras to the hospital and they quite literally just poke a scalpel into a corpse's eyeball.
Unbelievable.
That is insane. That is exploitation filmmaking right there. Like that is like anything for the shot, I guess. Like what else are you going to do?
That's what if the parents or whatever of that girl ever found that out? That's crazy.
Yeah.
Well, again, this has never been confirmed, so I guess there's never been any way to prove it.
Right.
So another one of the strangest bits of trivia that I found for the film is that the film producers apparently took out a huge life insurance policy on Christina Lindberg because they were using real ammunition during the action sequences. I guess they couldn't afford blanks, so they were using actual live ammunition during this. And then they also were asking when she injects like heroin into her, she's injecting saline solution into her veins. Yeah, which doesn't seem safe. I mean, better than heroin, I guess. But
yeah, I was going to say safer than actual heroin.
So Lindberg, of course, is the star of the film. The only other like significant character, I guess you would say, is he's called Tony in the I think he goes by another name, Peter or Jerry or something in the original Swedish. But if you watch the dubbed version, which is what I watched, where Lindberg is named Frigga, not Madeline, then you know him by the name of Tony. It's the guy who kidnaps her. So Tony was played by an actor by the name of Heinz Hopp. And Hopp had been acting in Sweden since the mid-50s. He'd been doing this for a long time, even appearing alongside Lindberg in Exposed 2 years earlier. And he had he later would retire from filmmaking, but he continued to make movies all the way through like the early 1990s. He was in Fanny and Alexander from Igmar Bergman. He was also in 1972. He appeared as he had a role as a Gestapo officer in Jerry Lewis's infamous lost film, The Day the Clown Cried.
Wow. No way. No way.
Yes.
Holy crap. Hey, just as a side, did you find in your research any reason for the name change, Madeline to Frigga?
I don't know,
Or
honestly.
why, if that was like a
I never saw why either.
I don't know, although I have to imagine, and I don't know why they made the change at all, but I have to imagine the name Frigga has to be related to the wife of Odin, who Odin being one-eyed. I mean, that's the only thing I can think of why they chose that name specifically.
I found it was when after they're at con, which I was going to bring up later, but I mean that AIP does it is who like makes the change, but I don't think
why I don't know.
Yeah,
that's okay. Yeah. I was just curious about that when you mentioned it last.
Yeah, I have no idea. Although that's the only other instance of the name Frigga that I know.
And you're talking about Scandinavia at that point.
Exactly. Right. So for the original release of the film, in order to cash in on the booming pornography market in Sweden and elsewhere, the filmmakers, or more likely the distributors, inserted shots of unsimulated hardcore sex. Lindberg was not involved in these scenes, claims to have been unaware of how they were going to be used, although there was a clause in their contract saying that sex scenes would be inserted into the film. But they're shot in a way to where it looks like it's her. Because it's during scenes with her, the Johns, but then they insert it in a way where it's heavily implied that it's her. So, but she contractually couldn't say anything about that. These scenes were shot separately from the rest of the production. They were actually filmed in an old sex club in Sweden where people just like had sex on stage. They just like brought the cameras into the sex club to film these scenes. And this is the version I watched, by the way, and including in its own home country of Sweden. So after the Swedish Film Censorship Board banned it, it was cut down to 104 minutes and then to 86 minutes, but it still remained banned. It was finally released after being cut down to about 82 minutes. Then it was also released in the United States as They Call Her One-Eye in that 82-minute cut.
You're telling me Sweden has all of that and free healthcare?
He's a trooper, man. This whole movie was his whole life from,
Vibenius.
Vibenius. Like everything he had, he put into this movie to make something. Like he always wanted to make movies, and this was everything he wanted to do. And then he worked from, I think they said like October to December of 1972, just like tirelessly, day and night, working on this film, trying to get it together, edited properly, all of that stuff. And then, of course, in April 1973, it's banned. And so good job, most commercial film on this film, trying to get it together, edited properly, all of that stuff. And then, of course, in April 1973, it's banned. And so good job, most commercial film ever. But he didn't stop. Like he packs up everything, takes the whole crew, and they go to the Cannes Film Festival in May, and literally getting like one of the first available VCRs that they could even get their hands on, and so they could show it to anybody that'll watch the thing, and taking all of the rest of his money that he had and spending it on eye patches. He bought like all these different color eye patches,
eye patches,
with stickers to like put on them to talk about, like, say the movie title or whatever.
I love that. What a genius.
Finally, they said it like a 7:30 a.m. showing. The AIP guys showed up and they watched it and bought it immediately. But then, of course, edited the fuck out of it. They put it on a double bill with the photographer's models first.
Revenge, where it called, like, the Hooker's Revenge advertisements are wild because they call like Lindberg Queen of the Skin Flick or something like that, you know. They were very much, and the picture on the Hooker's Revenge one is just like a close up of her face looking kind of like over her shoulder, and it's very, very much they're selling this on the sexual aspect of it, because in that picture she doesn't even have her eye patch. So
it's nuts, because I mean by this point, the sad part for Vibenius is that it's not his movie anymore, basically, and so he's just like kind of lost all control over it. They, like we talked about, Frigga is turned into Madeline. I don't know. Basically, they end up editing the thing. They fuck it up more than Tony fucked up Frigga. So that's kind of where the movie is. So he just has to accept that it's kind of out of his hands anymore.
I mean, They Call Her One-Eye is a pretty rad title, though.
Oh yeah, I mean that's not
it
bad
really
at all.
It's one of those great like grindhouse titles, I think.
Oh yeah, totally.
And so, and
you can actually hear like the movie voice guy.
Oh yeah,
they call her.
Oh, the trailer for this movie, which I'm sure
yeah.
we already played earlier in the show. The trailer for this is classic grindhouse. It is great. It's a great movie trailer.
Incoming transmission.
Hey folks, it's your old friend Mr. Todd A. Davis from the Cinema Shock podcast, here to ask, are you tired of seeing a random episode of Star Trek and thinking, I wonder where this falls into the overall prime timeline? I know I am. That's why I'm bringing you a new podcast covering the entire Star Trek franchise in chronological order. It's called Computer Resume Podcast. Each week, join me and a rotating panel of my family and friends as we boldly talk Trek like no one has before. If there's a joke to be made, we'll make it. And if there's a poignant discussion to be had, well, we'll try our best. We'll also have interviews, contests, other things currently deemed classified by Section 31. Those shifty motherfuckers. So join us every week starting in January of 2021 for the Computer Resume Podcast, free wherever you get your podcasts. And be the first to hit us up online now at Computer Resume on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Or email us directly at computerresumepodcast@gmail.com. The Computer Resume Podcast, part of the Slice of Fried Gold Network. Hashtag LLAP. We'll see you soon.
So as far as reviews go, like most grindhouse movies of this type, reviews by traditional critics were not kind to the film. But I'm curious, Gary, as the film's become, more infamous over the years, what more modern day internet reviewers might have to say.
Oh boy.
Well, the voices that we really look for to guide us in the ways of cinema to tell us you want to get on a message board or two, or check out the Amazon or IMDb reviews.
There are no better writers on film or pop culture in general out there, Gary, than YouTube commenters and IMDb posters.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I will say there are definitely people out there that when you read them, it sounds like somebody needs a nap.
Anyway, Gary, let's hear it. Let's hear it.
It's fun.
I am very curious about this one.
Well, I will say this. For you both were not here for Lady Snowblood, but one of the big problems there was there were not like any great 1-star reviews, although we found a couple. They were pretty blunt because most of them were 2-star reviews that were the bad reviews, but they were very smart, well thought out reviews. And there are plenty of 1-star reviews for this movie. And there are plenty of 1-star reviews for this movie. None are completely sounds like dumb people exactly, but they are some very angry people. So that's what to expect here. This is from the Terror
Angry
Beyond.
on the internet, you don't say.
What? This movie makes watching paint dry look like The Killer by John Woo. The action in this movie is not only barely present, it is also shot in extreme slow motion, thus rendering the action actionless. One would do better to buy a can of some sugary beverage, open it, pour it into a glass, and sit watching it all day until it congeals into some sort of moldy mass that would be much more exciting and entertaining. On to the sex scenes. The sex scenes in 2 words, they suck. The music and soundtrack. The music and soundtrack consists of some idiot scraping together the money to buy an Echoplex or whatever the early 1970s Echo device was around, and then I have already dedicated too much time to this stinker.
Oh, wow.
That is that
Who
guy.
was that? David 003475.
Yeah, that was the Terror Beyond. Here is, I don't know. I didn't say this person's name. A turtle fucked a snail and this came out. I love exploitation. I love revenge movies. This piece of shit sucked. It's not so bad it's good. It's so slow paced that by the end of the flick, I thought I was 80. The movie wastes most of its time with people staring at shit. Some of the grossest sex scenes I've ever seen. I swear, the woman's booty crack I saw had hair coming out of it. Good.
It's true. It does.
The slowest action scenes ever. It takes up to 2 minutes for one fucker to die. Abysmal storytelling and uninteresting characters. The only good scene was One Eye driving around, running random people off the road for no fucking reason. That was hilarious. But this is by far one of the worst exploitation movies I've ever seen. It is sure as shit not by far one of the worst exploitation movies I've ever seen. It is sure as shit not for its sex and violent theme. It is terrible. Period.
Well, Gary, I can I contribute to your somebody needs a nap? Would you mind? Because I have a couple that I found on Letterboxd. Half star review, half star out of 5. Things I have learned from Thriller: A Cruel Picture. 1 week of heroin use will cause fatal withdrawal symptoms. Also, there's no way of scoring smack in Stockholm, so you better just stay with your kidnapper and let yourself become a sex slave. Not even the government could come up with propaganda this stupid. The only good thing I have to say about this movie is Christina Lindberg is mute in it. That's a good thing because when she opens her mouth, she is by far the worst actress I've ever seen. And seriously, guys, she's not that hot either. This is supposed to be the flagship of Swedish exploitation. Well, here's one Swede that's not feeling it.
Oof.
And one more. This one went up to a full 1 star. Oops, I guess I rented the wrong Swede that's not feeling it.
Oof.
And one more. This one went up to a full 1 star. Oops, I guess I rented the wrong porno. Full review. I will say, I have to say the discussion about the sex scenes that are in the uncut version of this, which I watched. DJ, which version did you watch?
I watched the uncut. Yeah.
The uncut. So they are jarring. I mean, they are jarring and unnecessary. I've seen both versions of this movie, and I do think that the 82-minute version is probably better.
Because no value.
Yeah, they add no value. It's just, I mean, it's literally you're watching the movie, and it's the scenes where she's with the Johns, you know, and you see shots of her having sex in the uncut version, but they're not explicit. And then in the 107-minute version, it straight up cuts to a full, taking up the full frame of just, it straight up cuts to a full, taking up the full frame of just the back of a dude's ball sack and just penetrating her.
Wow.
And her butthole's on full display.
Gynecological was the best description of
a perfect
those sex scenes I've ever read.
It is a perfect description because and every sex scene that is in the movie is a variation on that shot. Even there's one where she's just like touching herself, but it's just a hairy cooch taking up the whole screen.
Like they just
and then there's one where the guy pulls out.
She's getting done.
No, it's because they wanted the people who wanted to pay for pornos to pay for a ticket to this movie. There's one scene where you see a guy pull out and just cum just drips all over the place. It's pornography. I mean, plain and simple, you know. But the thing is, I think it actually hurts the film because I think that the original version the version without those is much better because God,
if I had a nickel.
It's just
every time.
It's very shocking.
Like, damn it.
It's very shocking. It's very strange. But
the Tyler Durden edit.
There's times we watch those movies and there's sites for it. So you don't just want it.
You're ready. You're prepared.
And you have the skip forward button. Also, everybody's consenting.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it depends on what the plot of the particular video you're watching is.
Oh, yeah,
I guess.
true.
But, yeah.
What are you doing, Step Justin?
But here's the thing about this movie. Whenever anyone says they don't like a movie like this, I get it. Like, I really, I get it. This is not called A Cruel Picture without reason. The posters called it the movie that has no limits of evil. As we discussed before, Tarantino called it the roughest revenge movie ever made. So I don't expect most people to like this movie, honestly. But I kind of love this movie personally because I don't know. I love an exploitation movie like this that like they're just fucking going for it. You know what I mean? Like there are a lot of exploitation movies that do not live up to their reputation. Like this has a reputation of the roughest revenge movie ever made, and it lives up to that reputation. They don't live up to their lurid titles or their provocative poster art, but I think Thriller does all of these things. Like, you see the poster of this movie, you read the tagline of this movie, and you know what you're getting into, and the movie delivers what it's advertising, which 99% of exploitation movies do not do.
Yeah,
you know,
if I could be completely honest here, and I want to, the only thing that saved this movie for me, and I want to be as kind as I can because DJ has the tattoo, and so I want to step around here. I want to tiptoe, but I disagree that it lives up to all of the hype. I don't think that that's true. I think that she is the reason to watch the movie, and not just because she's naked. I'm not being like that about it, but Lindberg is the only thing that kept me interested. I think that she is, her facials, like her acting, for being an inexperienced actor. I can't speak for, if she could deliver lines or not, but something about her came through on screen. Like she has a
captivating look.
Yeah, she does. She's got a lot of screen presence.
Otherwise, I thought the movie was kind of boring like these other people. Like I thought the movie is not, and there's not like, it doesn't, I know you say going for it, and I get it. I talked about all the shit he went through to make the movie. Like, he wants to make a movie, and I'm, I appreciate that aspect of it, but I just feel like if you come in, there's not anything super enthralling here. It's just her on screen that is the only thing. But
she's in almost every scene of the film. Like,
I'm just saying, it's just her. It's like not the movie itself. It's like the movie itself is whatever. It's like it just kind of step by step into this, and it's dark. I'll give it that. It's a dark scenario, the whole thing, but it's just kind of, it's my least favorite of the ones we've watched so far for this series.
Well, I would say the same thing, but I still like this movie. But again, I totally get why people don't. And I honestly did not come into this episode expecting you or Todd to enjoy this movie. Honestly, I would have been shocked if you had. But and maybe it's because I've seen this movie before, and I saw it right after Kill Bill came out. So it was like one of the first, that Kill Bill was sort of the entryway into I've seen this movie before, and I saw it right after Kill Bill came out. So it was like one of the first, that Kill Bill was sort of the entryway into a lot of these exploitation movies for me. So this was kind of one of the first ones I ever saw as a result.
Yep.
And maybe that's my bias talking when I say I like this movie. And I get a lot of these reviews talk about it being boring or slow. They like to joke on the all the slow-mo use and stuff in it. But
I was going to bring that up. It's like this came out a couple years after The Wild Bunch and then Straw Dogs.
Yeah.
Which, Peckinpah is glorified for his slow motion violence.
Yeah, exactly.
And I have to believe that influenced this film.
Yeah. But the reason that he's doing that is because he wants you to feel every moment of violence.
Right.
Somebody gets shot, and
it's not, see that it's not
instant.
Pretty. It's not instant.
Yeah, when somebody gets shot, like it means,
the John that came in like Hulkamania underwear.
Yeah,
got on top of her. I don't know. Yeah, like that was the best one. The horse thing is cool, but it's
I wish you'd seen his head pop off.
But yeah, it's not like you see anything.
They didn't have the budget for that.
That are looking for. Yeah, I see people like looking for like, let's get crazy, let's see some fucked up shit, and you don't like that much, except the idea of it is fucked up.
The idea of it's very fucked up. It's a movie that shows you just how sleazy it's going to be from the first scene. This movie is a movie that begins with a child being raped.
That opening scene is so disturbing, and the shit coming out.
I was about to say that the only thing
coming out of his mouth, like
I was like, that was the only thing with this one is I was like, what the fuck's even happening here? Then later they're talking about he raped her. I was like, wait, so was he like raping her prior to this, and they're just buddying up in the park,
or maybe you don't see him in your version.
In this version it's just in the park,
or maybe you don't see him in your version.
In this version it's just a little girl picks something, runs up to him, and he picks her up, and it's just like he's twirling with her, and then he starts spitting up blue gook, and then the cops come.
In the uncut version, you see a shot that is from her point of view of him on top of her. Like you don't see anything. It's just a close up of like his face, but you can tell what he's doing. But it's shot from her point of view. So maybe that's probably a victim of the cut. Yeah. So it's in the 107-minute version. It's very clear what's happening. But you know, and it's fucked up and it's disgusting. But it is the movie telling you that what kind of ride you're in for. Like nothing is off limits. I
think probably just the black goo that's coming out of his mouth.
I have no idea what the fuck that is.
Yeah,
no clue.
It's just kind of wait, it's a monster.
He starts barfing up gook. He's got like the ooze from Ghostbusters 2 coming out of his mouth, and then he just like, and then she runs away, and then the cops are there, and he tries to hand her a flower or something, and the lady
gets smacked by mom. Yeah.
That song makes me think of Frankenstein.
Yeah. Except he's a little less sympathetic.
Except Frankenstein didn't fuck the little girl before he threw her in the lake. It's just.
Oh man!
Let's be honest. I want to see that version of Frankenstein.
I don't.
What's wrong with you?
Let's be honest. I don't want to see that version. I like Frankenstein's story, like the whole thing.
Yeah, I don't think we need to change anything about it.
I don't need any child molestation in it to like spice it up.
It's the Swedish cut. It's the
nothing.
Cut, guys.
No, there's not a single movie out there that needs more child rape.
None. Zero.
Oh, come on now, Justin.
Not one. I can't think of a single one that would be improved by the addition of a child getting fucked by
Episode 1, Phantom Menace.
Oh my god.
None.
Zero. Oh, come on now, Justin.
Not one. I can't think of a single one that would be improved by the addition of a child getting fucked by
Episode 1, Phantom Menace.
Oh my god.
There are a lot of people that stormed the Capitol that might disagree.
I will say this for it. I will say this for it. That the one thing that what's his face Vibenius does have going for him is that he does some great job, and I don't know if this is his cinematographer
Good call.
so than him, but the shots with the old man where he's like spinning around, or even when she's walking with her father, I assume it's her father, like later on the farm, and just every scene involving a dude, they do a great job of these like POV shots, like close-ups of a dude's face, and they look like the scuzziest like fuckheads in the world. Every single time it seemed just the worst. And so props to them for that. I guess I was more disappointed by it. It built itself up as like the roughest revenge movie ever made. Yeah, I mean, I guess like there's
for the time.
Historically.
Yeah.
I'm like, man, there's so much more than
on your grave coming out a couple years later.
I was about to say,
I mean, you've seen, you know, if you obviously there are much more fucked up movies out there now. I mean, you've got movies like a Serbian film, shit like that.
We were literally just talking about a Serbian film coming out of when we took a potty break. DJ and I were talking about it coming out on Blu-ray and just how fucked up that movie's supposed to be. Well, he's seen it, I haven't, but
I get why people don't like this. I get why Gary doesn't like it. I get why I am assuming Todd doesn't like it. But it's not a pleasant experience. So one of the articles that I came across when I was kind of looking so one of the articles that I came across when I was kind of looking into stuff on this movie was on the AV Club, and the title of the article was "Didn't Like It, Would Still Recommend It." So in this article, which I think that title alone tells you, like, if you're a fan of these types of movies, this is one that should be on the list. So one of the writers discussed this film in that article alongside another rape revenge classic, one that I think DJ just name dropped, called I Spit on Your Grave. And that's a movie that Roger Ebert famously, and he hated it and was very vocal, and it was a well-publicized battle between Roger Ebert in this film.
And to be fair, that movie I also dislike, but I appreciate that it's a decently made exploitation movie.
Yeah. So here's a quote from that article. The writer's name is Kenny Herzog. He says, if Tarantino and if Ebert and Tarantino have either endorsed or condemned a movie, Film Geeks of Death, Cannibal Holocaust et al. And I think he's right. I think for people who are into fringe cinema, Thriller is a movie that you have to experience at least once. I feel the same way about Cannibal. I hate Cannibal Holocaust. We've discussed this. Yeah. I think it's boring as shit. But I think that if you're a fan of like exploitation movies and fringe movies, like that is part of the canon of must see exploitation movies. Back when we were doing the Psychotronic Hall of Fame, you know, where we were doing these movies that we considered the must see, like cult movies, whether you like thriller or not, like it's a must see cult movie for its place in history.
As I sit here and think about it,
I can get behind that statement. Yeah. I mean, I think part of the, and I don't know that I ever actually said why I'm not a super big fan of this movie. There seems to be a lot of plot holes. Am I said why I'm not a super big fan of this movie? There seems to be a lot of plot holes. Am I off base there? Of just
like what?
Well, like,
I mean, the plot's pretty straightforward. So
there's a lot of like, you have to assume this is just the most ignorant chick in the world, but
I think the biggest
like her just kind of bebopping around town and then just going back.
This
like
is Sweden. This is the home of Stockholm syndrome.
Okay, all right. You know what? That just
I mean, I'll give you, like, it's weird that she just like hops in the car with this dude. I mean, but this is also a time not ours where you don't do that. But
right.
Next, they're going out to dinner, and I'm like, the reason you took the ride into town is because you missed the bus and you got a doctor's appointment.
Yeah, you got a doctor's appointment.
Now you're out to dinner.
She's been wined and dined by Tony Stark, and it's hard to turn him down.
And
it's a very European 70s thing. And his entire house is clearly decorated by the earliest incarnation of IKEA.
And
that's awesome.
A lot of the revenge stuff, like, just comes off comical. Like like a car gets run off the road and just explodes.
That is kind of funny. Yeah.
What?
I will also say they have karate trainer looked like the biggest dork.
Yes.
That is not no karate lady.
That little goatee.
You had the money to get trained in martial arts and driving, and
you expect that guy to come in with a
why not just pay all those guys to just go kill all the people?
That's true. That's a good point.
But he's like sitting there most of the time. She's like, I just need to know how to like fucking flip people. And he's just like, I flipped like 6 people one time at the mall when they were messing with my lady.
My lady.
They were messing with my lady.
My lady. But the thing, I mean, paying someone, she doesn't get the satisfaction of
fair enough
taking these guys out themselves.
Yeah, I get
now,
that.
I would say the biggest plot hole is that
there are actually answered it a lot with Stockholm syndrome. So
but
okay, that actually does take care of a lot of it.
The movie's explanation for it is she's returning to get her smack. Yeah,
right.
Although I would say that if there is a big plot hole in the movie, it's that there are other places to buy heroin.
Yeah,
right. Not your old Tony doesn't have the he doesn't own the market on heroin in Sweden.
Not with that apartment.
Hey, that apartment's pretty sweet.
You know what I think a lot of it is for me too, is that like if you take a movie, say I Spit on Your Grave, I don't know if it's this way for everybody, but for me, will make me turn away the quickest. And Justin, you and I remember we went and saw like The Hills Have Eyes, that remake that happened. And there's a scene where there's like a rape scene and they've got a gun to a baby's head.
That seems it's rough.
Yeah, and it's super rough. And like I still remember that scene. It is probably not nearly as bad as I built it in my brain. It's been a while, but I still remember that scene as being one of the first times in a theater I've been like, man, I gotta get out of here. Like, this is too much. Like, I hate rape scenes in film, like that Rob Zombie director's cut of Halloween, like where they trade Michael escaping from the shackles to like 2 inmates are raping a patient or something like that in the background. And I'm like, I fucking hate it. Like,
I mean, I get that, but in the case of like the Rob Zombie one, it's completely unnecessary and pointless to the plot.
Yeah.
But in this, it's literally part of the plot.
Yeah. Where I'm getting to this is, so rape is a serious offense. Like, it is a destructive, awful thing. It's like one of the, I hate to say it, but like even with like murder, sometimes slashers can be fun, you know, but it's like rape is just like never fun on screen at all. It's just awful every single time. And so the catharsis that you get from a movie that features this, so like a revenge flick, is that you get to live out the vengeance that the person applies to these people that have wronged her in this way. And I feel like that happens. Like in I Spit on Your Grave, there is a detailed death for every single person that
cuts a dude's balls off.
Yeah. It's like fucking
Spoiler,
hangs
but
one, like, and just it's impressive, like how violent she gets with these people. And I feel like in this movie, and this is a little earlier on, I guess, so maybe they just hadn't built to it. It just didn't feel as, I don't know.
Yeah,
it's not as much of a punch to like her getting her revenge.
Well, and every, I mean, she's shooting a guy with a shotgun pretty much every time, with the exception of the last guy who she kills with the biggest horse I've ever seen. By the way, that thing is enormous. That horse is a monster. But yeah, she just basically shoots everyone else with a shotgun. She only uses really her karate skills on the cops who are trying to stop her, which shows just how determined she is to exact her revenge. But I do think, though, and this goes back to kind of that quote from the AV Club where they name dropped Cannibal Holocaust and Faces of Death. I think this is a better made movie than those. I think that Vibenius is definitely hindered by his clearly very low budget, but he definitely has some skills. I mean, this is a guy, after all, who, and yes, there are, the movie never shies away from the exploitation aspect of it. There are, after all, hardcore pornography inserts in the movie, but there's some real skill on display from Vibenius. Like, you've got the scene where one scene that really stood out to me is where the camera's like mounted on top of the cop car and you've got the sirens on either side of the camera. And it's a great shot. It's a really good shot. And it's not the kind of shot that you would normally expect in like a cheap exploitation movie. I feel like if Vibenius had continued his career, then he started making like quote unquote legit movies, that he could have, that skill could have really shown through. I think another note that should be discussed, or at least mentioned, is the score by Ralph Lunston. Lunston was a pioneer in the world of electronic music. He was actually one of the first people to build his own electronic music instruments back in the 1950s. And by the time Thriller was released, he had about 9 music. He was actually one of the first people to build his own electronic music instruments back in the 1950s. And by the time Thriller was released, he had about 9 albums under his belt already. Oh, wow. And he didn't do a ton of film work. Like this is one of a few movies he did. He actually had done Exposed, the Lindberg movie, a year before this. But I think that's another thing that, like, it's a good original score like that, even if it's a cheap electronic score, because it's much cheaper to do something like that. That's why so many horror movies in the 80s use synthesizers. It feels like it's a little bit better than a lot of exploitation movies in that regard.
I would definitely say he has skills. I can see that for sure. And like I said, I mean, he does a great job of making all the Johns and every dude she interacts with just seem skeezy and weird, and just it makes you uncomfortable. I think I go back to like initially, like you mentioned, I forget who you said it came from, but referring weird and just it makes you uncomfortable. I think I go back to like initially, like you mentioned, I forget who you said it came from, but referring to him as a emotionally detached person.
Yeah, it was Lindberg.
Yeah, Lindberg. So I wonder if that doesn't have some aspect or like some part of that is not what I'm thinking of when I'm talking about like the revenge aspect of it, that maybe he doesn't get quite the punch that it needs on the comeback.
He gets the mechanics of revenge, but not the greater spectrum of the catharsis.
Right.
I think part of that thinking is the fact that this movie was released almost 50 years ago. It was released almost half a century ago, and this is a very early entry in the revenge subgenre. So, at least, especially as far as what was available to American audiences, obviously, Lady Snowblood, but that was not widely available. Like this,
but
movie,
also, by the way, very
emotional.
emotional and like just insanely you felt in Lady Snowblood.
I'm not going to pretend like Vibenius is nearly the director that Fujita was. That is not what I'm saying at all. But what I am saying is that this was, you've got 50 years of movies that you've seen. And obviously they're not all revenge movies, but you've seen, your fair share of revenge movies that have been released within that time, or now you've seen something like Kill Bill, let's say, where it is, the deaths are very satisfying. You see people with their heads lopped off, blood going everywhere, like in Lady Snowblood. And, you've come to expect that out of a revenge movie. So you're expecting that out of this revenge movie, even though that precedent had not yet been set at the time that this movie was made.
Yeah, right. That's true.
Right. So after Thriller,
I just want to see the guy's head come off.
I did really want to see that guy's head just pop off, just like it had not yet been set at the time that this movie was made.
Yeah, right. That's true.
Right. So after Thriller,
I just want to see the guy's head come off.
I did really want to see that guy's head just pop off, just like a little grape, just pop off.
You showed us so much else,
including
butt crack hair
and ball sacks.
Ball sacks. Can you at least show us the head getting popped off?
Actual cum. You showed me actual cum, and you won't show me this guy getting his head popped off.
You saw somebody's, potential great grandchildren on screen, living and dying right in front of you on screen.
Actual baby shower.
That's the tweet. Oh my God. Oh, that's the tweet, guys.
So after Thriller, Lindberg continued her acting career, although the roles got smaller and more spread out. And in the mid-70s, she ended up going to journalism school and began writing for several magazines, including Fib Actualette, for a few years earlier. So this movie didn't really even though it made her internationally infamous, it didn't necessarily help her career because the movie was seen as, it's very lowbrow, very exploitation, very trashy. For lack of a better term. As she got older, she kind of withdrew from acting. She still appears in things every now and then, but she's actually dedicated her life more to doing environmental work, a lot of work with animals and the environment. She's also gotten really into mushroom foraging. So she's really into mushroom foraging, which she actually went so far as to produce a short film with her husband in the 90s called Christina's Mushroom School, where she
that's the movie we should have watched.
I actually just went on a mushroom foraging class.
Yeah,
so I need to see this.
Check out Christina's Mushroom School. So as for Bo A. Vibenius, his follow-up to Thriller was a movie that the author I mentioned before, Daniel Ekeroth, calls the definitive Swedish sensations film. It's a movie from 1975 called Breaking Point. Music was again by Ralph Lundstrom. The movie sounds absolutely insane. It is not available. I can't find it anywhere, but it's not available to stream or anything like that, or on DVD that I can find. But it sounds like a bizarre kind of surreal action film. That happens to also be a full-on porno. So here's what how Ekeroth describes it. Quote, this is the quote from that book. Breaking Point is without a doubt one of the oddest and most fascinating Swedish movies ever. Judged by the perverse level of strangeness, no other movie even comes close to Bo A. Vibenius's curious opus. Breaking Point lacks action sequences and an understandable plot, but compensates handsomely with an array of unsettling hardcore pornography. He goes on.
I think he really knows how to shoot porn and can't do the follow-up, the other side of that emotion, the fighting and violence.
It's basically he shoots porn, but it's like he's thinking about Thanksgiving with his in-laws. No, I'm working on a movie. It's definitely not a porn. It's lots of action, revenge, very thought-provoking. Yeah, definitely not a porn.
They're stuffing.
The way this guy is, the way the movie is described, it's like this is too weird. Like the non-porn stuff is too weird and bizarre and surreal and incomprehensible to appeal to the people who want to see a porn. And the porn stuff is so blatant to where it's not going to appeal to anyone else. So it doesn't appeal to anyone. In that same book, in that same review, Ekeroth describes scenes where the film's main character spikes a woman's coffee. In that same review, Ekeroth describes scenes where the film's main character spikes a woman's coffee with his own semen, and a dream sequence where he shoots rubber bands.
Bill Cosby?
Well, he'd put a semen directly in the coffee.
Oh, okay. Sorry.
And then
put it right in the pudding.
And he describes a dream sequence where the main character shoots rubber bands at his own, quote, very erect penis.
Listen,
That's not
when you're bored on a Friday night, sometimes you get an idea. You have
who
rubber
hasn't tried to
bands and you
flick a
think, you know
peanut?
what? I could get it in the trash can from here. So you just
or you're talking about using your penis as the instrument.
He says
flicking,
he shoots rubber bands at his penis.
not with. Not with.
I was confused about that. Okay,
Like, he likes the feeling, the sting.
No, what you're talking about is totally normal.
Oh, okay. All right. I was just wondering.
It's like launching a peanut.
There you go.
So Thriller or Breaking credit. He's kind of faded from history. I
imagine by this point he's like, I don't get. I guess
I don't understand what the public wants.
I'm never going to work for Pixar. It's fine.
Little did he know, Inside Out, he was like, "Oh, damn it!"
But
I saw he became like a. Well, I was just gonna say I saw he became a production manager, and he worked on like Bo Wiederberg's film Man on the Roof. And then the last thing I saw was he produces commercials for Channel 1 in Switzerland or something like that. So, he's still out there.
Still out there. He's in his 70s now.
Paying those bills.
But, I mean, his legacy still lives on, and a large part thanks to Quentin Tarantino, honestly.
Yeah.
Because we're still talking about Thriller now, almost 50 years later. Talk about, in the last couple episodes, we've leaned pretty heavily on the influence that the movies have had on Kill Bill, because they're very, very obvious, pretty heavily on the influence that the movies have had on Kill Bill, because they're very, very obvious in Death Rides a Horse and especially in Lady Snowblood. And this one, it's a little more like, it's a revenge movie, and obviously the Elle Driver character is modeled after her, but that's about it. I mean, honestly, but this is the type of revenge movie that is like part of the film history that informed Kill Bill. I mean, Tarantino's a fan.
It seems like the inspiration he got from this was more aesthetic.
Yes,
I would
agree.
Like, hell, it seems like he could have gotten as much inspiration from the poster as he did from the movie.
Right. Yeah. But he does enjoy this movie. He calls, he says Christina Lindberg is like, I think he calls her the coolest actress in Sweden. And they actually got to meet a few years ago when he was doing a tour in Europe. I want to say it was for Inglourious Basterds. So he was doing like, when they were premiering in Sweden, he specifically asked the producers to like, I want to meet Christina Lindberg, I want to meet her. And they met. Wow. And she says that he was really cool. And like they got each other's autographs, it's like very kind of sweet. I don't know.
Actually, that's kind of nice.
So
yeah,
anyway,
I saw even he recommended Daryl Hannah watch this movie or something as part of like the prep for the role and that sort of thing.
You have to wonder if his like character Bible for Elle Driver had some sort of backstory that was similar to Frega's in this movie.
And thinking about that, it was just kind of like, hey, this is your character's backstory. And then after this movie wraps, you got involved with Bill, and here we are.
Yeah. So I do want to mention we introduced a new segment last week that I would like to continue going forward called Further Viewing, where if you enjoyed this movie or if you didn't enjoy it, but you just want to watch similar movies that I think would pair well with this one. For this week, we've already mentioned Kill Bill. Yes, is a good one. So we've already mentioned one of the films several times, which is 1978's I Spit on Your Grave, directed by Mears Archie. If you have not seen it, it's another one of those. You got to see it at least once. I'm sure we'll talk about it on this show at some point in the future. It's not planned right now, but it's one of those movies that like you got to see it at some point.
Is it streaming anywhere?
I don't know. Don't watch if you search for it,
There's a 2010 version.
Don't watch the remake. Don't do that.
Okay.
But
have you seen the remake? I've never seen it. I'm just curious.
I don't think I've seen it. It's unnecessary. I don't need a remake of a movie like I Spit on Your Grave. But it stars the granddaughter of Buster Keaton. So that's
really
kind of fun. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, it's pretty wild. But yeah, I don't know if it's streaming. I'm looking too, and
I'm looking too, and it just keeps wanting to give me.
It is. Yeah, it is. It's on as of right now. It's on at least on YouTube and Google Play to rent and buy. So it looks like it's under the other title, Day of the Woman, that it was released under. So another one I would recommend if you're in the mood for a pretty, what I would consider a pretty badass revenge movie, 1981, Abel Ferrara's Miss 45.
Yes.
That movie.
Yes.
That movie fucking slaps.
Such an ass kicker right there.
She dresses up as a nun, and it's a rape revenge movie. It's another movie with a badass female protagonist, and she walks around dressed as a nun and just decimates dudes. It's great.
Oh, wow.
And it's set in 1981 in like Abel Ferrara's New York, which is the sleaziest version of New York that has ever existed. But I would highly, highly recommend Miss 45.
That's streaming everywhere.
Yeah, Miss 45 is pretty easy to find. It was released by Arrow, I think. From 2017, one that I really liked is Coralie Farjat's Revenge. I think Revenge is really cool. It's a Shudder original, so it's easy to find. It is a revenge movie that is told. It's a story told by a woman. It's one of the few of these like rape revenge movies that's actually directed by a woman, and it's got some bizarre plotting, I would say, but it's very satisfying to watch her on her own roaring rampage of revenge.
It's a lot of fun. And if I could throw one in too, by the time this airs, you'll be able to find it on streaming. I mean, it's coming out like widely this month, is Promising Young Woman.
Yes.
And that movie is a blast.
I've seen the previews for that. It looks pretty awesome.
Yeah, I'm excited to check it out. It comes out tomorrow, actually, I think, as of our recording. So this episode will be definitely
pretty awesome.
Yeah, I'm excited to check it out. It comes out tomorrow, actually, I think, as of our recording. So this episode will be definitely out. By the time you listen to this, it'll be out. But
okay, let me put forward the movie to avoid.
Okay.
Some of you guys, I think at least Gary and Justin, DJ, I don't think you were there for this, but we watched a movie at my apartment years ago called Black Sisters Revenge.
Yeah, I vaguely remember.
Super boring. It's 90 minutes of build up to her kicking him in the balls, and that's the end.
Yeah.
And so if you're in for revenge movies,
don't watch that one.
Go ahead and pass on that one. So
I would say Sympathy for Lady Vengeance.
I actually considered mentioning that one, but I think Sympathy for Lady Vengeance would be another great one. That is it's the third part of a revenge trilogy.
Yes.
I mean, they're only connected by, of course, the theme, which is Mr.
I'm aware that Promising Young Woman, if somebody watches it based strictly off this recommendation, you probably won't, but if you did, it is not as dark as it's similar subject matter, and it is dark, but it's also like mostly cast, besides like Carey Mulligan, by a lot of comedians. And so it's very odd how it plays out, and it's very twisty. And
comedians are pretty damaged people, so I imagine this.
I'm sure that's why they're in this movie.
Yes, but they're all compensating for something.
Absolutely.
It's a very good movie though, and a very much a revenge movie.
Yeah. So next week on the podcast, we're continuing this series. We're halfway through now. This is 3 of 6 that we're going to talk about. Next week, we're going to talk about one that is probably a little bit more well-known, I would say, the world around, and another one that you will very clearly see the influence in Kill Bill. And that is from 1978, starring Bruce Lee, his final film. I very clearly see the influence in Kill Bill. And that is from 1978, starring Bruce Lee, his final film, I believe, if I remember correctly, which is Game of Death.
His final film that he didn't even get to
didn't actually get to finish, which we'll talk about that next week. But you'll clearly see the influence in that. That'll be a fun one to talk about because that's a very interesting story. It's another one that's pretty easy to find streaming in a few places. Hit up cinemashock.net to find out where. We'll have a link there where you can find out where you can stream it, or get that new Criterion box set. I got it for Christmas, and it is pretty badass. Nice. It's called Bruce Lee's Greatest Hits. It's got 5 or 6 Bruce Lee movies in it, all in like 2K or 4K restorations on Blu-ray. It's pretty awesome.
Nice.
So we're watching Game of Death next week. We're of course there were going to be more kung fu movies in this. That's not even the last one. There's going to be more kung fu movies. There's got to be more kung fu movies. So watch Game of Death and join us next week. DJ, thank you for coming on the show, bud.
Yeah, thanks, guys.
Yeah, thanks for
really
coming,
enjoyed
DJ.
it. I haven't watched this since probably that Synapse DVD came out. So
yeah,
it's been a while.
So yeah, you're welcome anytime. Anytime you want to that we're doing a movie you want to talk about, you are.
For the listeners, I definitely did wink every time I said thanks for coming.
And Todd, thank you for joining us again. I'm glad you're feeling better, bud.
Thanks for having me, guys. It's great to be back.
DJ, where can you be found on the internet? Anywhere for people?
Probably
Letterboxd.
Twitter and Letterboxd. Right knuckled
with a W. Right.
Yeah.
Gotta spell that out for people.
RITE knuckled.
Right knuckled. And how about you, Todd?
At Mr. Todd A. Davis on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Letterboxd, and D&D Beyond.
Do you legitimately check D&D
Do you like
Beyond every
D&D
day?
Beyond?
Well, not every day.
Do you have the app?
I don't have the app just because I like it better.
Todd, be honest. Are you fucking using D&D Beyond?
Yeah.
Do you have to roll a certain?
It's all
post?
it's all digital, so it's it takes all of the fun out of it. But it's a community. It's nice.
Community of fucking nerds. Gary, where can you be found on the internet?
I am at This Is Gary Horn on everything. Parlor, Snapchat.
You can't
Not
Parlor's,
for long.
Parlor's
AWS
gone,
is
my
about to
dude.
Shut them down.
Is Parlor gone now? Yeah,
Parlor's gone, my dude.
At least as of this recording, it's supposedly disappeared. So,
and I am at Justin_Bishop. Find the show at Cinema_Shock on Twitter, Instagram, and you can find us on Facebook or at cinemashock.net. Once again, where you can find all of our episodes and links to buy all of our merch. The merch looks really good. We all got some this week or last week. I'm wearing my Cinema Shock t-shirt right now. Now, listeners can't see that, but it's there. It's there. It's really nice quality coming from our friends at Threadless.
there's stickers.
There's stickers. There's mugs. There's face masks. I got a hoodie.
Those face masks are awesome. I actually got a couple.
The hoodie, the French terry, I think is what it's called. Where it's like a fleece kind of material on the inside. It's the warmest, softest hoodie I own. It's amazing. Nice. So I'm very, very happy with how those.
You like our Scully logo.
The Scully logo is great. We've got them with the Scully logo with the name of the podcast, or we've got each of our catchphrases on shirts. If you want to buy a Johnny Has the Keys t-shirt, by God, it's out there.
There's at least one sold.
There is. My wife bought one, so at least one person.
My wife bought one too. So that's
all right, there's two.
Fellas.
There's two.
Which probably the highest selling shirt we have.
It probably is right now. So it's out there. And Threadless does sales all the time too, which is super cool. Which means that those sales, get trans. And we're not doing this to make money because we don't make hardly anything off these shirts. We just think it's cool that you guys can get a shirt with our logo on it.
Yeah.
We want them out there. We want you to tag us in pictures of them. We'll repost you on Instagram and Twitter and stuff. We just want people to be stoked about supporting the show, which is super fun. Speaking of supporting the show, share the show with your friends, as we always say. Gary always talks about how important that is. You think it's not a big deal, but it's like it helps a lot. Word of mouth is the only way that the show even exists because we don't have money to advertise or anything, so we just want you to tell your friends about it. If your friends are into Kill Bill, if your friends are into, exploitation movies like we're talking about right now, or if your friends are into fucking,
movie history,
Christopher Nolan movies, or learning about deep diving into movie history
or Star Trek.
That's coming soon. There was an ad earlier in the show.
That's
for it.
true. Yeah,
people heard it. Don't worry. Once it launched, there was an ad earlier in the show.
That's
for it.
true. Yeah,
people heard it. Don't worry. Once it launches, we will make sure people know about it. So, but yeah, you can follow Computer Resume on at least on Instagram right now, right?
At Computer Resume on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
Oh, you're everywhere now. All right. So yeah, go follow that as well. I guess that's it, guys. Until next week.
May the wings of liberty never lose a feather.
Be excellent to each other.
Johnny has the keys, and I have COVID.
No, you don't anymore. You're better now, right?
Oh, I still technically have it.
The cool part is you don't have to worry about the vaccine for a while.
That's true. At least 90 days.
Yeah, there you go.
There you go. All right. Bye, everybody.
Bye.
You guys. Bye.